Hey folks, welcome back. This is Chris at the Lakes District here in England and Windermere. So I've been waiting patiently for over a week for South Africa's Foreign Ministry, DIRCO, Directorate of International Relations and Cooperation, to issue a response to the report issued by the U.S. Department of State on human rights abuses in South Africa. Now, they gave an initial response in which they cited sources which essentially were the same sources the U.S. government used for its report. They claimed that the U.S. wrote a contextual report that didn't reflect the reality of the ground in South Africa. But the problem with that story is that the places they used were the South African Human Rights Commission, the French Press Agency, Amnesty International, most of whom were sources that the South African government referred to in its initial rebuttal, saying that the information was inaccurate, it was hyperbole, and it wasn't reliable sources. But the sources the U.S. government used were the same ones that the South African government alluded to, the South African Human Rights Commission and the French Press Agency, to be specific. But 8 days later, they do finally come up with a response, and I've just noticed this today. So this is a response from DIRCO saying South African government sets the record straight on farm crime, but they touch on a whole host of other things here. They said our nation's foreign policy is guided by a commitment to rules-based international system. But rules-based international system and foreign policy have nothing to do with what's happening in South Africa. That's an internal matter, so I'm not sure what the reference to that is. They said that the suggestion that crimes represent a concerted practice of racially motivated attacks, as insinuated by the U.S. report, is not borne out by the facts. Well, in fact, the facts do bear that out. Now, whether it's sponsored by the state or not is a whole separate issue. I'm not contending the state is sponsoring the racially motivated attacks, but racially motivated attacks are happening, and they're happening with greater and greater frequency. Murders, rapes, assaults, land invasions, property theft, home invasions. Yeah, these are racially motivated. And to deny it is just a lie. So the South African Police Service's official statistics on rural safety for the fourth quarter of 2024-2025 financial year, that's January 1st of this year to 31 March, demonstrates the reality. A total of 6 murder cases reported in farming communities. A breakdown of the victims reveals that these crimes are not targeted against a single racial group. 3 victims were employees, 1 victim was a farm dweller, and 2 were farmers. Now, the problem with that, of course, is that these statistics are just poppycock. Total lies and fabrication. I don't know about those statistics, but I can tell you for certain, I know of farm attacks that have been falsely categorized as things not farm attacks. People have been raped, murdered, and it's listed as house robbery, most recently in Brits. Much to the embarrassment of SAPS, when we exposed this story, I have a copy of the police report. It's a problem. When you file a police report and you commit fraud, which is what SAPS officers have been doing, this is a case in Brits where an elderly couple was attacked on a farm 3 nights in a row. The first night they came and they poisoned their dog, so they had no security, no early warning. Man in his 70s, his partner in their late 60s. Poisoned their dogs, so no early warning. The next night they stole the wheels, the tires off the front, driver's side, and the passenger's rear off the bakkie so they couldn't escape from the remote location of Brits. And the third night they broke in their home at 2 o'clock in the morning, tied up a man who recently had a hip operation in a wheelchair to a wheelchair, and then nearly beat him to death while they beat and assaulted his wife, demanding to know where things were. In the end, they took the television and a couple small items so they could be classified as a home invasion. The man remained tied up for hours, nearly dead. Finally broke free, crawled over to his partner and released her. She ran to a neighboring farm and got help. 4 days later, he died. Now, this report filed by SAPS was listed as a house robbery. But that's total poppycock, and so are thousands of other fake police reports in South Africa. Thousands of them. This was at a minimum trespassing, home invasion, breaking and entering, assault with a deadly weapon, attempted murder. Those are at least 5 felonies right there, none of which are listed on the police report. That gentleman died 4 days later. How cowardly do you have to be to tie someone up in a wheelchair who's paralyzed and can't move and beat them to death? What kind of scumbags do this? And what kind of government covers up this crime? And what kind of government denies that it's not racially motivated? It was racially motivated. The attempt was to frighten them off the land. They're gone. He's been murdered. She's fled the land. The farm is vacant and disused now. This is the goal. This is the objective. And this response by the South African government is just mealy-mouthed nonsense. The government continues to implement a comprehensive multidisciplinary approach to rural safety. No, you don't. You disbanded the commandos, one of the few effective tools at deterring rural crime over 15 years ago. And crimes have spiked ever since. It's out of control. And this report by the government is an absolute joke, to say the very least. We stand ready to engage with any nation on matters of mutual interest through established diplomatic channels, and will continue to provide accurate, data-driven information to counter any misrepresentations of our domestic situation. There is a focus on the safety and security of all South Africans. Crispin Peary. I'm afraid that's just poppycock, Mr. Peary. I'm sorry. Who got you to publish that propaganda? There's a focus on the safety of all South Africans? Really? Really? Tell that to a 14-year-old kid nearly beaten to death outside his home today. We don't know the motivation behind that. Was it a school incident? Was it bullying? Was it racial? We don't know. We'll find out soon enough. But you're committed to the safety of all South Africans. The number of murders that have occurred in South Africa since the advent of the African National Congress, 750,000 people have been murdered in that country over the past 30 years, roughly. That's a commitment to the safety of South Africans. You underfund, you under-resource, you create fictional military ranks for the police to give big paychecks to the incompetents. You've been run by a parade of criminals and those who are incompetent. Jackie Salibe, notable. And then the incompetence of Beckett Chile, who is not a garden boy. We're well aware of that. He's not qualified to be a garden boy. This is utter nonsense. You're committed to the safety of South Africans. It's utter nonsense. And you stand by the data. The same government for 3 years, over a decade ago, refused to release crime statistics because things were so bad. And now you simply doctor the crime statistics. You report attempted murder as a house robbery. That's poppycock. And if this is your response to the State Department Human Rights Report, this is the strength of your response, well, then it's just not believable. I don't know who you're publishing it for. The Chinese know better. The Iranians know better. And they're very happy about what you're saying and doing. We know better. The United States government knows better. The public is not fooled by the propaganda that the African National Congress is putting out. And make no mistake, it is the government of national unity. But foreign affairs is controlled by the ANC, part and parcel. They refuse to talk to their coalition partners about foreign policy or negotiate or to work with them for foreign policy positions. They decide what the foreign policy is in Latuli House. Therefore, they're responsible for this poppycock and nobody else. What say you, South Africa? Mzansi, from the Lakes District in England. This is Chris. Cheers.